Right. Moving swiftly on. The next item of business today is a member's business debate on motion number 6981 in the name of Claire Baker on 82% of Scots in favour of compulsory microchipping. This debate will be concluded without any questions being put, and I'd invite those members who wish to speak in this debate to press the request to speak buttons now or as soon as possible. And I'd invite those members leaving the chamber and indeed those members people leaving the gallery to do so as quietly as possible to allow the debate to proceed. I now call on Claire Baker. 7 minutes, please, Ms Baker.
Thank you, Deputy Presiding Officer. I'm pleased to be having this members' debate this afternoon. I'd like to thank all the MSPs who supported the motion. I would also like to thank the Dogs Trust for their campaign to promote compulsory microchipping of dogs across the UK. The Dogs Trust is the UK's largest dog welfare charity, with two rehoming centres in Scotland, one in Glasgow and one in West Calder. I was pleased to visit the West Calder site earlier this year to see their facilities and learn more about their work and the valuable role they play in rehoming dogs. In the last year in Scotland, they have rehomed nearly 2,000 dogs. And at West Calder, I had the opportunity to learn more about microchipping and its benefits. So the benefits of microchipping are widely recognised. A recent YouGov poll for the Dogs Trust suggests that 82% of adults in Scotland are in favour of the introduction of compulsory microchipping for dogs. Public support is important for introducing a change like this, and these figures are very encouraging. Principally, microchipping enables a lost or stray dog to be quickly reunited with its owner. Microchipping is a permanent method of identification. Collars and tags can be removed or lost, but a chip is permanent. Many owners already take the decision to have their pet microchipped. It encourages responsible dog ownership and can lead to the owner building a relationship with advice services who can then support their decision to own a dog. But why should it be compulsory? Why not leave it up to the individual owners? Well, part of it is that owning a dog is often not a decision that only impacts on the individual. While there are many responsible dog owners across Scotland, MSPs will know from their own mailbags that irresponsible dog ownership, whether that is dog fouling or stray dogs or noise pollution, can be detrimental to our communities. One of my local newspapers, the Dunfermline Press, this week highlights problems with dogs running off the lead and causing problems in public parks. Instilling a responsible approach to ownership can help address some of these issues. And for dog wardens and other local authority workers dealing with these issues, it enables easy identification of owners to tackle the problem. For example, in their recent survey of local authorities and environmental health officers across the UK, the Dogs Trust found that while Scotland has one of the lowest numbers of stray dogs, there has been a decrease in the number of strays who are quickly reunited with their owner. On average, 12 dogs a day are picked up in Scotland. Microchipping assists rapid return, allowing dog owners to then emphasise to the owner their responsibilities and, where appropriate, that straying is not acceptable. In addition to this, under current arrangements, local authorities carry the significant burden of kennel costs for stray dogs. And increasingly, that is delivered in a partnership with a private provider, whose costs then have to be negotiated. While costs can be recovered if an owner is identified, when we look at Scotland's relatively poor reunification figures, this is not always an option. And the delay in reuniting a dog means higher costs for the owner. So compulsory microchipping would reduce costs for the local authority, as well as the owner recovering their pet. I have welcomed the support from Fife Council for this proposal. Fife Council have taken a very proactive approach to responsible dog ownership and recognise that compulsory microchipping is a beneficial tool to make it easy as possible for owners to look after their dogs and be responsible within their communities. The permanent nature of microchipping can also act as a deterrent to dog theft. Around 3,500 dog thefts were reported across the UK last year, up by 17% on the previous year. Microchipping is consistently given as the top deterrent for theft. Of course, we are dealing with criminal activity, and depending on the reason for the theft, it may not be enough of a deterrent, but it does provide a disincentive to theft. Compulsory microchipping can also lead to easier identification and subsequent arrest of owners guilty of animal cruelty. It can also help support actions to address dangerous dogs. Currently in Scotland, dogs can be required to be microchipped if they are the subject of a notice issued under the Control of Scotland of Dogs Scotland Act 2010 or under the Dangerous Dogs Act 1991. But that is only once a dog has been identified as a threat. If microchipping was compulsory, owner identification would be quicker and the workload and cost for local authorities would be reduced. If, like the rest of the UK, we were to decide on a system of microchipping before first change of hands, it means that all puppies could then be traced back to their breeder, helping to tackle puppy farming and lessen the incidence of infectious disease and inherited defects which many of these dogs can suffer from. There are questions over cost effectiveness, I do recognise that. Microchipping costs typically around £20 to £30, and that is a one-off cost which covers the dog's lifetime. Although this might be a difficult amount of money for some people to find, owning a dog does cost money, whether it's food bills or vet fees or grooming costs, and I would argue that in the overall picture, microchipping is affordable. But to address the concerns there may be over cost to the owner, the Dogs Trust is working closely with local authorities throughout the UK and offers microchipping for free. They are committed to ensuring that no dog... very briefly.
Christine Graham.
Just very brief on cost. What is the cost of keeping an up-to-date database for, say, local authorities?
Claire-Baker.
And that is obviously a cost that would be, at the moment, I think it's how it operated down south, is that it's private provider, so the cost would fall onto the dog owner to maintain the data, to help maintain the database. But that is certainly something that would be explored fully in a consultation. They are committed to ensuring no dog owner will lack the financial ability to get their dog chipped. Since compulsory microchipping was introduced in Northern Ireland, they have chipped around 100,000 dogs for free and are running a number of partnerships with local authorities and housing associations in Scotland. And actually, when I say again on the cost, owning a dog is not a cost-free option. There are costs involved in owning a dog, and if you're a responsible dog owner, you have to accept the responsibility to meet those costs. Concerns over compliance are held up as a reason not to opt for compulsory, but international experience suggests that the levels of non-compliance are moderate and the benefits of compulsory outweigh the concerns over non-compliance, and evidence from countries that use a compulsory system indicates clear welfare benefits, particularly in terms of increased proportions of stray dogs being returned to their owners. Of course, microchipping by itself is not enough. Owners need to register the microchip and keep their details up to date. We would need a system that was robust and where databases were compatible. Since the YouGov survey results, we have seen a positive change of direction by the Scottish Government. Northern Ireland introduced compulsory microchipping in April 2012, and so far their experience has been positive. Following consultation in February, the UK Government announced compulsory microchipping of all dogs by April 2016, and the Welsh Government announced compulsory microchipping of all dogs by March 2015. Scotland must not be left behind, and that is why the Scottish Government's announcement they will now consult by the end of the year, having previously resisted this, is very welcome. Perhaps the Minister can say today when that consultation will be launched. Following the consultations in the rest of the UK, the consultation can practically be lifted off the shelf, and we could even see us introducing compulsory microchipping before the UK Government and see Scotland taking a lead on this issue rather than playing catch-up.
Many thanks. I now call on Kenneth Gibson to be followed by Malcolm Chisholm. 4 minutes, please.
Thank you, Deputy Presiding Officer, and I'm afraid I would like to apologise in advance to the Chamber. I'll have to leave the debate before it concludes. As you know, the Presiding Officer arranged for committee conveners to question the First Minister and has chosen me to ask the first question, so I'll have to leave quite quickly. But I'd like to begin by thanking Claire-Baker for securing this valuable debating time, and also to echo her comments, noting the excellent work that Dogs Trust carry out to ensure the welfare of dogs. Indeed, last year I visited the Rehoming Centre in Glasgow, which also serves my constituency, to see firsthand how the charity care for dogs that may have been abandoned or strayed. I'm certain that most members from across the Chamber appreciate the importance of microchipping and the benefits it brings to dogs and owners alike. This issue is one I've been greatly interested in for a while, and I'm pleased that the benefits of microchipping dogs have already been noted in my own constituency after I hosted the first free microchipping event in Scotland this June. This event was tremendously successful, with a total of 167 dogs chipped free of charge. I'd like to reiterate my thanks to Dogs Trust for their dedication, hard work and professionalism on the 21st of June, when they went above and beyond the call of duty, driving for 5 hours to the event, beginning early and working for more than 4.5 hours without any kind of break due to the high turnout and long queues. I have to say that constituents who attended the event were delighted to be there, and I would hope that due to its success, this event is the first of many. It is important to underline that it is the legal responsibility of dog owners to ensure the welfare of their pet, and indeed in the Scottish Government's Code for the Welfare of Dogs, a recommendation is included advocating the use of microchipping. I appreciate that during the current economic climate, the financial burden of having your dog chipped can be off-putting. However, Dogs Trust have kindly offered to provide free microchipping at their 2 rehoming centres and at their roadshows as well, saving owners the estimated £20 to £30 cost to microchip their dog. I'm sure you'll agree with me that it's important to advertise this service as widely as possible to increase the numbers of people having their dogs chipped. With the recent YouGov figures showing, as Claire-Baker has pointed out, 82% of the Scottish public supporting compulsory microchipping, I believe most owners will be happy to take up Dogs Trust's offers where they can. But of course, many people live in the far-off corners of Scotland and cannot really get to the 2 rehoming centres. Microchipping will also be more efficient than the licensing system currently in place, saving dog owners time and money. The popularity of microchipping amongst dog owners is, of course, no mystery, and the benefits of microchipping dogs are clearly numerous, and these were spelled out in detail by Claire-Baker, talking about reuniting pets, returning dogs who have been stolen, dealing with negligence, enabling prosecution, tracing, and dealing with hereditary defects. And many owners, of course, already acknowledge the importance of microchipping. Indeed, recently I dealt with a case where one of my constituents had their dog stolen, only for it to be retrieved again in England and returned to him, thanks to the dog being microchipped. It is important to emphasise that benefits of microchipping are not just limited to dogs and their owners. Introduction of a compulsory microchip will save local authorities substantial time when dealing with dangerous dogs, considering how lengthy and fruitless the dog control notice system currently in place can be. By taking a preventive stance, local authorities will be relieved of the financial burden this process costs, while also making associated savings in areas such as kennelling costs. As Claire-Baker mentioned, Scotland is thus far lagging behind. Northern Ireland brought compulsory microchipping into effect in 2012. Wales will do so by March 2015 and England by April 2016. Being left behind should not be an option for Scotland, and I believe that an initiative to introduce a compulsory microchipping of dogs would help to ensure the safety of dogs and put the minds of both owners and, in the event of a dangerous dog, the general public at ease. I am confident that with the support of this Parliament, such an initiative can be created and the benefits of that realised. Thank you.
Many thanks. I now call on Malcolm Chisholm to be followed by Christine Graham.
Presiding Officer, I support this motion and congratulate Claire-Baker for bringing it to the Parliament today. I think there are many reasons that can be advanced. Firstly, it causes no harm to dogs, and I think it's important to state that at the beginning, since I believe some people have suggested that it potentially could cause harm to dogs. The Dogs Trust is supporting this, so I think we can have no doubt that this is in the interests of dog welfare. It is also, of course, very beneficial for owners who may be highly distressed through losing a dog, and that would be another fundamental reason for microchipping, because clearly it is very easy through microchipping to connect a lost animal with the owner. Having made those 2 points, some people may argue, well, I accept that, but it should be the individual decision of an owner to go ahead with this. Now, I think there are several responses to that. Some of them have already been suggesting in terms of the public cost of kennelling, for example, when there are a large number of stray dogs. We could also add to that the fact that quite often dogs have to be slaughtered eventually if they cannot be reunited with their owners. But I think there's an even more fundamental point, and that is that the dogs of some individuals cause problems. And I think that is absolutely crucial as well in terms of arguing the case for microchipping. My own view for a long time, based on constituency experience, is that we need to be tough on dog problems and tough on the causes of dog problems. And quite frankly, in many ways, I do not think we as a society are sufficiently tough at present. And that is in no way a statement that is against dogs, because we all recognise that the problems that dogs caused are ultimately the problems caused by certain dog owners. One of the most awful things that can happen to any person, but particularly to any child, is to be attacked by a dog. And I live in absolute dread of that ever happening to one of my young grandchildren in particular. And I think that microchipping can have some effect on dealing with that problem. I think that's already recognised, because under the control of Dogs Act, for which I congratulate Christine Graham, any dog that has a dog control order imposed on them will have to be microchipped. So that association has already been made. I think the problem with that Act is that not nearly enough dog control orders are issued. So we have to look at it from the other point of view and ensure that all dogs are microchipped, so that any dog that is causing a problem, the most serious kind of problem being an attack, But as we all know, there are many other problems that a dog running around in various places can cause. That dog can be identified and connected with their owner. So I think in terms of the problems caused by dogs, microchipping is very important. And we all hear about problems caused by dogs every week. The most common, as we all know, is dogpiling, and we should never laugh at that or write that off. That is a massive problem. I'm not aware that microchipping can deal with that problem, though I have to say one of my constituents did suggest to me that in the long run DNA profiling could actually solve the problem through microchipping. I'm not arguing for that today, but I think we can all see that theoretically and potentially that could be done. Personally, I would just ask the government to increase the fine for anyone who is caught with a dog fouling, because that is an enormous problem in streets and in parks. And again, it's in association with children that I particularly worry about dogs and the effect it has on their lives in terms of their parks and their play areas, as well as the health risks of dog poo. The final example I give is this very week, when one of my constituents was most distressed because he said he'd been on the cycleway, and apart from the problems that dogs running around on cycleways cause to bicycles, he'd seen a dog off the lead destroying a cat. So I also think councils should use far more bylaws prohibiting dogs from being on cycleways, and also prohibiting dogs from being not in all parks, but in some parks, so that some parks can remain the province of children.
Many thanks. I now call on Christine Graham, to be followed by Nanette Milne.
Thank you very much, and thank you to Malcolm Chisholm for making reference to control of dogs. I think the trouble is the owners, not the dogs, on the cycle paths. But can I congratulate Claire-Baker for bringing this debate? I didn't sign your motion. You're going to find out why. As you know, I piloted the Control of Dogs Scotland Act, and I chair animal welfare. I have a lot of time for the Dogs Trust. I have a huge amount of time for a universal voluntary microchipping. I think there are great advantages for good owners, and I had an example myself. I'll be very brief, but on January the 2nd, a few years ago, 3 o'clock in the morning, picture it, tucked up in bed, yowling outside the window. There I find a little Staffordshire Terrier peeking through the hedge. I have 2 cats. The cats were in a state of terror as I brought this Staffordshire Terrier in. What do I do with it? I'm leaving for air in the morning. I can't keep the dog. I had to eventually phone the police, not in the emergency line. Hours later, they turned up to question me, to take the dog, to take it down and keep it overnight for the owner to find it. I think the most embarrassing question to be asked was not my age, but was, what do you do for a living? I was sitting in my pyjamas with this dog and cats climbing the walls. I said, I'm a politician. That really made their day. Anyway, it was microchipped. But the interesting thing about that dog being microchipped was the owners didn't come and get it for a week. And I wondered about that, and I wondered why they hadn't done it. And I was told it's quite common for them people to dump their dogs over Christmas, New Year, over the holidays, so somebody else pays for the board and kennels. And this one was microchipped, so we're able to get it. But one of the concerns I have is bad owners, who in my view won't microchip their dogs anyway, do this all the time, and they're certainly not going to have the microchips so they can be tracked. But there's something else that comes to mind in this, and the Dogs Trust support it, but interestingly, the SSPCA do not. The jury's still out for them, and it's still out for me about compulsory microchipping. In a perfect world, yes, but I'm afraid we live with imperfect people, imperfect dog owners. For instance, you mentioned, Claire-Baker mentioned that dogs that come from breeders, but what about somebody that just passes it, the next door neighbour? You know, there are dogs that change hands that never go past breeders, good or bad, and they're not going to necessarily get microchipped. Dogs that are dumped. You're going to dump a dog because you've had enough of it, because it's not that lovely wee fluffy puppy anymore. Not necessarily with microchip. You're certainly not going to have it microchipped so it can be tracked back to you as having dumped it. Or a dog that you've got from somebody else that was microchipped. You've now got it. It's passed through several owners. Unless you keep the database up to date, the person who's going to be tracked to that dog has got nothing to do with it anymore. So there are issues. I'm not saying it's a bad idea. I'm saying there are issues. That's, if you let me just, I've only got 2 minutes. I'm just putting tests in. I'm not trying to prevent it going forward. It's just law of unintended consequences. You see, what Mike Flynn said, Senior Inspector at the SSPCA, we support voluntary microchipping of pets, but not necessarily compulsory chipping. There is no point in making compulsory unless there was a system and legislation in place to ensure that details are kept up to date and transfer of ownership is recorded, the same as if you sell a car. So there are issues about tracking. There's also issues for Mike Flynn about this. A quote from, we already get abused and emaciated animals being dumped by cruel owners in an effort to avoid detection. If dogs, indeed cats, were microchipped, some of these people may try to remove or destroy the chip to avoid detection. Now, somebody said, I think yourself, you can't remove a microchip. Yes, you can, but it damages the dog. But you can remove it. You can cut its ear off. You can cut a bit out of it to take out the microchip. You don't do it nicely, but you can certainly remove a microchip. So all I'm saying to you is this. Think of the law, my favourite phrase, the law of unintended consequences. Your purpose and the purpose of the Dogs Trust is excellent, but there are other issues to be addressed that don't make it easy either to make the legislation or indeed to have it policed and to get at the people who are the bad owners.
Many thanks. Now calling Annette Milne to be followed by Fiona MacLeod.
Thank you, Deputy Presiding Officer. I too would like to congratulate Claire-Baker on securing this debate because despite recent efforts to encourage responsible dog ownership, there are still too many examples of poor control and the indiscriminate breeding of dogs. The Guide Dogs Charity reports 8 dog attacks per month, and we've seen the horrific mauling of a family pet in an Aberdeen street by a Staffordshire Bull Terrier, and an Inverness man nearly losing an eye after being attacked by a dog as he sat on a bench beside the River Ness. Such recent attacks have demonstrated the need for action to promote responsible dog ownership and to address the illegal breeding of dogs. And whilst microchipping will not solve the problem, it can help to identify the culprits, as well as making it easier to reunite stray dogs with their owners. The public mood appears to be increasingly in favour of compulsory microchipping, and as we've heard, elsewhere in the United Kingdom, Northern Ireland introduced it in April last year, the Westminster Government's announced it will be introduced in England by April 2016, and Wales plans to have it in law by March 2015. Over the past year, with the help of the Dogs Trust, I've been pressing the Scottish Government to do likewise in Scotland, and in May I was very pleased when the Cabinet Secretary agreed to meet with me and with representatives from the Dogs Trust to discuss the issue. We had a very constructive meeting, and I very much welcome the Cabinet Secretary's agreement to undertake to proceed with a national consultation on the compulsory microchipping of dogs and the control of dogs in Scotland, which should answer some of Christine Graham's questions. In his response to the debate, I would be grateful as well if the Minister could give us an idea of the timetable for this consultation. There are specific issues relating to puppy farms and to the cross-border movement of dogs, particularly from the Irish Republic and Eastern Europe. But the most pressing issue raised with me as an MSP is the indiscriminate breeding of dogs in socially rented properties. I recently visited Angus Dog Rescue near Arbroath and saw at first hand the consequences of this. Dog rescue centres across Scotland, like the one in Angus, are seeing a significant rise in the number of dogs being abandoned and are experiencing a particular problem regarding the breeding of certain types of dogs, such as bulldogs and Staffordshire Bull Terriers. I'm in no doubt that when properly cared for and raised in a responsible environment, these dogs make wonderful family pets. But sadly, more and more indiscriminate breeding of these dogs has resulted in many dangerous feral animals, and concern has been expressed to me that in time there will be a serious or fatal accident because of this. It's my understanding that current legislation allows for tenants in socially rented sectors to own dogs only after notifying the landlord, and that the breeding of dogs isn't permitted. However, I'm told this isn't always being enforced, and it's been suggested to me that a small number of properties already known to the authorities are often at the heart of the problem. So I would ask the Minister to look at this problem and wonder if he'd liaise with the Housing Minister to review current guidance on the keeping of dogs in the socially rented sector, and perhaps agree to meet with representatives of organisations like Angus Dog Rescue to learn more about the indiscriminate breeding of dogs and how this serious issue may be addressed. Before I conclude, Presiding Officer, I'd like to pay tribute to the work of all Scotland's dog charities and the many individual volunteers who strive to secure for so many abandoned and neglected dogs the loving homes which they deserve, with responsible owners who know how to control and bring out the best in what are very wonderful animals. Finally, I do hope the Government will listen to public opinion, pay heed to the excellent work of the Dogs Trust, and bring Scotland into line with our neighbouring countries by introducing compulsory microchipping in Scotland as soon as possible, and ideally prior to the change of the English law in 2016. Thank you.
Many thanks. Now call on Fiona MacLeod to be followed by Jenny Mara.
Thank you, Deputy Presiding Officer, and can I add my thanks to Claire-Baker for bringing this important debate to Parliament today. There's been lots of very interesting facts and figures from the previous speakers, but I come to this debate very much from the heart rather than from the head. I adopted Sophie, my cat, from the SSPCA in 2002, and we were not allowed to take her home without accepting that she would be microchipped. And 2 years later, when I bought my Dalmatian Rona, that was my first thought, was she must be microchipped. And it's because of, Claire talked about the fact that in Scotland there are over 2,000 dogs a year who are not reunited with their families. And I just think that must be heartbreaking. And that's, you know, one of the simplest things to do is to microchip your dog. I also remember the story of my neighbours, Westy Hamish. They lived next door to us, and this is over 10 years ago. Hamish wasn't chipped, and Hamish was stolen. He didn't stray, Hamish was stolen. And about 2 weeks later, Hamish's owner was driving along the road and saw Hamish, got out, challenged the people, and they gave him Hamish back. Now, Hamish wasn't microchipped. I think Hamish got back because his owner was in a police uniform when he challenged the people that stole him. Would it not have been so much easier if Hamish had had his chip and he could have, you know, without having to exert his authority in that way? And I also remember when I was young, round about 8, this lovely mongrel came into our street, Sally. And Sally was adopted by the Windrums, and she became part of our street, part of everybody's family. But you think how it must have been awful for her first owners who never got Sally back again. We had the joy, but they didn't. Malcolm Chisholm referred to some of the claims about the health of using microchips. And can I say, in the whole time of this debate, I've only ever had one email from someone that has raised rather dubious health claims about microchipping dogs. So being the librarian that I am, I went away and did a bit of research, and Malcolm Chisholm's absolutely correct. There is very good evidence to show that microchipping is useful for social purposes, but also is not harmful to the individual animal. So in conclusion, Presiding Officer, I would like to say that I think evidence and emotion mean that this makes sense. So I'm really pleased that the Scottish Government, as Nanette Milne said, announced earlier in the year that they are going to undertake a consultation. I understand that Cabinet Secretary spoke to the British Veterinary Association on this matter in June. So in conclusion, I would like to urge all dog lovers to take part in this consultation when we get it, but also to say to people like Christine Graham, who have some doubts about it, to be involved in the consultation, so that at the end of it, the evidence shows clearly that this is something that we want to do for ourselves and for our animals. Thank you.
Many thanks. I now call on Jenny Mara, after which we'll move to the closing speech from the Minister.
Thank you, Presiding Officer, and I want to thank my colleague Claire Baker for bringing this important topic to the Chamber for debate. I would like to pick up on a couple of points that Christine Graham raised. I'm sorry she's no longer in the chamber, but I also congratulate her on the legislation she brought forward in 2010 on dog control notices. But I wonder, Minister, if perhaps it is now time to review that legislation. Kenny Gibson said in his speech that he called the dog control notice process lengthy and fruitless, and certainly on the evidence from my communities, the community safety wardens who are responsible for issuing dog control notices because it's within the power of local authorities. The ones I speak to in Dundee aren't aware that the dog control is within their power. They actually think it's within police power. And I'm about to address something awful that I think Nanette Milne alluded to that happened in Angus this summer. It's my understanding that Angus Council have issued no dog control notices whatsoever, despite the fact that there was a terrible attack. So, Minister, I would just say respectfully, I know the legislation was very well intended and there was a thorough consultation done, but I wonder if we really need to look at its effectiveness, because I come to this issue because some of the communities I represent, especially the most deprived communities in our country, have real issues with these dangerous dogs, some breeds of very dangerous dogs that are let out and are roaming the streets and then attack children. Because it was in August this year that 13-year-old Amy Adams was in a park in Arbroath when she was attacked by a stray Staffordshire Bull Terrier. A terrifying experience in itself. She sustained a puncture wound to her hand which became infected, and she was in surgery for 4 hours. Amy was first treated at Arbroath Royal Infirmary, but the infection travelled up her arm. She was rushed to Ninewells Hospital in Dundee to see the specialist plastic surgery team. And Amy's story is by no means unique. In May this year, a 13-year-old boy was rushed to hospital after being attacked by a dog in a home in my home city of Dundee. And it's very difficult to forget the story of 10-year-old Rihanna Kidd, who was attacked by 2 Rottweilers as she played on her bike in Dryborough in 2010 in my home city. I think irresponsible dog owners are a threat to our communities because the psychological consequences of a dog attack, as Malcolm Chisholm said, can last long after physical recovery, especially for young children. I believe, and I'm supporting Claire-Baker's motion today because I believe that compulsory microchipping could help tackle dangerous dog attacks by creating that culture of more responsible dog ownership. And by providing that clear line of accountability from dog to owner, it could help reduce the number of dogs that go stray, like the dog that attacked Amy. And it could help police trace those dogs that do become dangerous back to their owners. Of course, microchipping is not an answer in itself, and it will not stop dangerous dog attacks. But I think it could help by encouraging responsible behaviour and keeping children safe from harm. I would support this motion, but I would also ask the Minister if he will consider looking at the 2010 Act, perhaps bringing some post-legislative scrutiny, and certainly looking at how many of these dog control orders are being issued and how effective they are.
Many thanks. I now call on the Minister, Paul Wheelhouse, to close the debate on behalf of the Government. 7 minutes, please, Minister.
Thank you, Presiding Officer. And Presiding Officer, I certainly congratulate Claire-Baker on bringing forward an important subject for debate today. And indeed, the debate has been of great quality, I think, in terms of the different perspectives people have on the issue. The Scottish Government does recognise and values the important work that many animal welfare charities and organisations undertake in rescuing and rehoming unwanted animals across Scotland, including the work of the Dogs Trust. The debate, if nothing else, I think, has highlighted the importance and the value on a voluntary basis for owners to microchip their dogs. And indeed, I think the number of members have mentioned the support that's available from the Dogs Trust to fund the cost of that as well. So hopefully, if nothing else, the media coverage of a debate will pick that up and remind people of that opportunity. As Claire-Baker and Kenneth Gibson identified, we've long recognised the benefits of microchipping, as I say, and that is why we recommended it as best practice in our Code of Practice for the Welfare of Dogs, published in 2010. Microchipping can prove an invaluable tool in helping to reunite lost, stolen or straying dogs with their owners, and in potentially reducing the number of healthy dogs being put to sleep, which I agree with many members is extremely distressing consequence of dogs not being microchipped or being able to be reunited with their owners. And the Scottish Government is also aware that many welfare organisations, groups and individuals in favour of the introduction of compulsory microchipping in Scotland believe that it will help tackle the problem of puppy farming and many health and welfare problems it creates, as Claire-Baker referred to early on. They also consider that compulsory microchipping could prove helpful in raising a better awareness of the duty of care owners have to their pets, thereby fostering a culture of more responsible ownership. And indeed, the very horrific incidents that Jenny Mara referred to, and indeed Nanette Milne referred to as well, are just illustrative of why we need a culture of responsible dog ownership in this country. My colleague Richard Lockhead, MSP, Cabinet Secretary for Rural Affairs and Environment, met with representatives of the Dogs Trust and indeed with Nanette Milne in May of this year to discuss the issue of compulsory microchipping of all dogs in Scotland. At this meeting, Dogs Trust highlighted the recent YouGov poll that Claire-Baker refers to, which showed that 82% of Scottish adults surveyed support the introduction of compulsory microchipping for all dogs in Scotland. The Dogs Trust also advised that they currently offer free chipping by appointment at any Dogs Trust centre and will be offering a free microchipping scheme for a limited period in Wales and England in advance of compulsory microchipping. The Dogs Trust has also assured the Scottish Government that if compulsory microchipping is introduced in Scotland, they would indeed offer a similar free chipping scheme here for, again, a limited period. At this meeting, the Scottish Government agreed to issue a formal consultation on the introduction of compulsory microchipping for all dogs in Scotland. However, we do still have some concerns, particularly in relation to the cost and practicalities of enforcement. I'd just like to outline some of those. The effective enforcement of compulsory microchipping for all dogs could prove relatively resource intensive. I understand that currently local authority animal welfare officers cover a wide range of duties in addition to dog welfare, and not every local authority has the resources available to offer a dedicated dog warden service in its area. And indeed, the point that Jenny Mara raised about some dog wardens not even being aware of the abilities they have to enforce these measures is interesting indeed. So although compulsory microchipping would reduce the financial burden that local authorities currently face when dealing with stray dogs, it could create a new burden in terms of allocation of available resources to enforce new legislation. The Dogs Trust have, of course, committed to offering a free chipping scheme in Scotland for a limited period, should compulsory microchipping be introduced. And we do appreciate that this generous service would help those on lower incomes to microchip their dog, though we do still have some concern in relation to the ongoing associated cost for dog owners in ensuring their details are accurate and up to date. And I think it is important to note that presently costs vary between database companies and owners on having their pet chipped. May not be aware of this factor, nor have the choice of which database company their details are registered with. And just to pick up a point in terms of my understanding of what is happening in England and Wales, certainly in terms of DEFRA and the Welsh Government have apparently no intention of operating a central or local authority database themselves. So we would continue to rely on commercial databases that already exist at this point in time, or at least that would appear to be the likely outcome. I think it's important to note that presently costs, as I say, do vary, and so we have to take that into account. Irresponsible owners who also allow their dogs to be out of control are already required to microchip their dogs if they receive a dog control notice under the Control of Dogs Scotland Act 2010. And I certainly do congratulate Christine Graham, as others have, for bringing forward that legislation. And this makes it easier for local authority appointed authorised officers to monitor and enforce dog control notices that have been issued. I should also mention the Justice Committee earlier this week took evidence on provisions contained within the UK Government's Anti-Social Behaviour, Crime and Policing Bill, and the Scottish Government is seeking to extend, by way of a legislative consent motion, provisions to Scotland that would explicitly include attacks on assistance dogs as an aggravated offence under the Dangerous Dogs Act 1991, and ensure that courts assess the character of the owner in determining whether a dog poses a danger to public safety. And it's obviously an important point in relation to guide dogs and other dogs which assist people with disabilities. And the Scottish Government is fully aware of the move towards compulsory microchipping throughout the rest of the UK. We understand that England plans to bring in compulsory microchipping for dogs as part of its wider dog controls in 2016, and indeed, as others have mentioned, Wales plans to make regulations to ensure that all dogs are microchipped by March 2015. We are aware that compulsory microchipping has been enforced in Northern Ireland, obviously, since April of 2012, after having been made a requirement for obtaining a dog licence under the Dogs Amendment Act Northern Ireland 2011. And at the British Veterinary Association annual Scottish dinner in June, and as Fiona MacLeod has mentioned, my colleague Richard Lockhead has made a speech reinforcing the Scottish Government's commitment to consulting on compulsory microchipping, and announced that this would take place by the end of 2013. So the precise detail of the timetable has to be identified, but give you an indication as to the timing of this consultation. Consultation is currently being drafted, and in it we'll be seeking the views of the Scottish people, Scotland's local authorities, animal welfare charities and organisations, and all other interested parties, particularly on the issue of enforcement and the potential impact of introducing compulsory microchipping in Scotland. The Scottish Government will continue to work on this issue to the timescale we've previously announced, and will consider what is best for Scotland before it makes a decision. If we do decide to go ahead with compulsory microchipping for all dogs, we would expect to be able to introduce this around the same time as in England. And that's, Presiding Officer, I will rest. Thank you.
Many thanks. Thank you all, and I now suspend this meeting of Parliament until 2:30. Thank you.